Good afternoon. Call to order the May 5th, 2022 meeting of the Santa Barbara Local Agency Formation Commission. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Seves,
Here.
Commissioner Allen,
Here.
Commissioner Freeman,
Here.
Commissioner Guyer,
Present.
Commissioner Hartman,
Here.
Commissioner Richardson,
Here.
Commissioner Sierra,
Here.
Commissioner Stark,
Here.
Commissioner Waterfield,
Here.
Commissioner Williams,
Here.
and Commissioner Nelson.
Here.
Thank you. A quorum being present, would you please stand and join the commission in pledging allegiance to the flag? Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. The next item of business is the Assembly Bill 361 determination. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak from the public?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, there are no requests to speak under this item. And at this time, I would just like to remind members of the public wishing to be called on for public comment on any item on our agenda today to please use the raise hand button on Zoom or to use *9 on your touch-tone phone when the item that they wish to speak on has begun. When the chair calls for public comment, the clerk will announce you and will unmute your microphone at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Is there any discussion from the commission members? Hearing none, I will now entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
And I'll second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Seves,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stark.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item of business is the approval of minutes from the April 7th, 22 meeting. I would entertain a motion unless there's a question.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Commissioner Seves,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stark.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Now is the time for public comment, which is for time for members of the public to speak on items that are not on the agenda. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak on items not on the agenda?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak under public comment.
Thank you. That concludes public comment. The next item of business is the approval of the consent calendar. Would any commissioners like to pull an item from the consent calendar? I'm hearing none. Are there any requests to speak from the public on the consent calendar?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak.
Thank you.
Move approval.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Seves,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stark.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is changes of organization. Madam Clerk, would you please read that item into the record?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, changes of organization item number 1 is to consider approval of LAFCO application file number 19-09 regarding the property located in the unincorporated area of Santa Barbara County at the southwest corner of Patterson Avenue and Calle Real to be annexed to the Goleta Sanitary District, annexation number 380, the Galileo Pisa annexation, and to adopt the resolution.
Thank you. Mr. Executive Officer.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair and Commission. This is the Galileo Pisa annexation. It's finally here. Happy to see it. So this was an application that was submitted by the landowners on behalf of a petition from their property manager. It was located at that southwest corner of Patterson Avenue and Calle Real. It includes a total of 1.62 acres. The purpose of this annexation is to provide sanitary sewer services for 27 apartments that were approved through county planning. The sphere of influence is included within this territory for the district. Look at our map here, just north of 101 here is Calle Real, right on the corner of Patterson, and that's where we're at, kind of central located to the district. Get a zoom in map here. Here's the parcel that's being annexed. It's currently vacant as a remnant of a avocado orchard. The additional development includes this small little parcel right here. It's already in the district, this tiny little corner piece. So those two together are the two parcels that we're talking about. Obviously, only the larger parcel needs to be annexed. The land use for this is residential. The applicant went through county authorization for a general plan and rezone to DR 20 to allow for the 27 apartment units. The district has provided their plan for service that outlines that they can adequately provide services to this apartment project. And that's included in your attachments, is attachment E. As part of the consideration of approval, the county adopted a mitigated negative declaration for the apartments of the general plan amendment and rezone. So the commission is being asked to consider that you've considered this MND and that it does meet CEQA needs for our action. As I indicated, the parcel is vacant, and so it's less than 12 registered voters. The district has consented to waiving the conducting authority proceedings as well as the property owner, and so we can proceed with the annexation without notice and hearing of that election. Concluding is the site is located in an area that obviously is surrounded by the district, and so the district is the best service provider for this area and into the future. It does make a reasonable and logical extension of that district service boundary. So with that, we are concluding that the commission adopt the resolution, including consideration of the mitigated negative deck. Are there any questions of the commission? I'm happy to answer any.
It's back to the commission. Are there any questions from the commission members about this? I have a question for council, which is whether the council has reviewed the mitigated negative deck and is satisfied that for our purposes, it's accurate.
I am satisfied with it. I don't purport to be the environmental review officer, but I looked at the ND and talked to Mr. Prater about it, and on its face, it looks adequate.
Thank you. Mr. Geyer had a question, I believe.
I did. Are all the fees paid?
Question is, are the fees paid?
All the fees to process this application have been paid. As far as our LAFCO fees, there are still fees that will be owed to the state for filing with the state BOE. Those are to come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Would we be correct in assuming that the failure to pay the fees to the state is not a reason to disapprove the project?
Yeah, that's typically done after approval has been granted. Then we proceed with the recordation of this annexation as part of that process.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak from the public?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak.
Thank you. The item is back to the board for discussion, or if none, if no, Commissioner Hartman.
So this item did come before the County Board of Supervisors, and I think it passed with a unanimous vote. And as we noted, it is within the district already, so I would move that we adopt option 1.
Thank you. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I just had a question.
A question by Commissioner Aceves.
When the county addressed this, one, it's converting a avocado orchard, but it's at a very busy intersection. Was traffic considered? I see the CEQA did not apply here, but was traffic considered when the county reviewed it?
In great detail.
And it wasn't an issue?
They're going to change the left turn lane, I believe, add a left turn lane for it. And that may mean taking out some trees, but it isn't a great intersection, but it's a lot of other projects that have led to that, not this one on its own. And I don't think traffic is our concern here at LAFCO, so it was something determined to be mitigated to the extent feasible by the county.
Thank you. Counsel?
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Aceves, page 37 of the MND does cover some of the traffic impacts. And the other thing I would note about the MND, which was prepared by the county, this was signed off on by the county, looks like May 11th, 2021. And the statute of limitations has long since run for someone to challenge this. So typically as a responsible agency, unless we have new significant information that requires reopening of the environmental document, we would defer to the lead agency's determination. So when I say I'm not trying to be the environmental review officer, that's because as a responsible agency, we really appreciate it when the lead agency, like the county in this instance, does their job.
Thank you. I have Commissioner Nelson and then Commissioner Guyer.
Yes, thank you, Chair Stark. Just if it adds some additional comfort for my fellow directors, this was a very thoughtful project. There were abilities for it to be denser and to have more impacts, and I think the developer did an excellent job doing something that would maximize it, but at the same time not to minimize traffic impacts.
Thank you. Commissioner Guyer?
No, I didn't have any comments. I just was seconding the motion.
Oh, so so it's motion by Commissioner Hartman, second by Commissioner Guyer. Is that correct? Thank you. Any further discussion? I think I asked for public comment, did I not? And we did not hear any public comment. Thank you, Commissioner Aceves. Madam Clerk, hearing no further requests, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Aceves,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stark.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is business item number 1. Will the clerk please read that item into the record?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, business item number 1 was continued from April 7th, 2022, and it is to present a certificate of appreciation to Steve Lavanino.
Mr. Executive Officer, can you explain the circumstances here?
Sure, thank you. Yeah, so this was continued. We had a bit of a scheduling conflict with our outgoing commissioner, Steve Lavanino. So we continued it to this date. We thought we had him pinned down, but he's eluded us once again. And so I think the request has been to go ahead and proceed and honor our esteemed guest. And we will find the plaque. We'll send that to him when we get a chance to. But I don't think he wanted to attend the roast or something. I don't know.
Thank you. No, we might schedule a roast for Supervisor Lavanino as a recurring item on the agenda, and hope that he shows up.
That would teach all outgoing commissioners.
In any event, would any commissioners like to say some words at this time?
Well, I'll just get a kick out of talking like he's dead, and just say that Steve has been one of the more transformative figures, I think, at the county, not just at LAFCO, but at SBCAG, on the county board, on a number of things. His unique ideological independence and willingness to concentrate on pragmatic results for people, I think has been one of the largest developments in making the multiple boards that we sit upon as county supervisors more productive, more cooperative, more dwelling on results, and less prone to sort of us retreating into our ideological corners. And so I think it's been a tremendously positive influence on all these boards. It would be great to have them nailed down on all of them, but we'll make do here with that.
Any other commissioners?
Commissioner Guy.
Commissioner Guyer, then Commissioner Hartman.
I agree with Commissioner Williams. I've always appreciated Steve Lavanito's down-to-earth attitude about stuff, and when things can get heated, he always seems to be pretty calm, and he's been a great influence on our LAFCO. Thank you.
Commissioner Hartman.
He makes work fun.
Anyone else?
Yes, Chair Stark, I just, I didn't get to serve with him on LAFCO, but I've got a chance to serve with him on the board and when I was a staffer. I think one of the tributes at the end of Steve's career, as Doss is trying to bury him already, is, there's been some criticism in the community about some of these offices for supervisors that have run unopposed. And that's not because, he has this big political machine and everybody's afraid of him. It's because he's done such a great job that since being elected that he's gone, I think now 2 or 3 terms without an opposition, is because I think anybody else looking to serve in that seat quickly measures up against him and even upon self-reflection realizes Steve's the best representative for that district. And so I think that's really a tribute to his service to his district and the county. And I am honored to be able to chance to step in on LAFCO to be a representative of Valley and take his tutelage back to this board.
Thank you. Any other? Thank you. I will merely note I certainly enjoyed serving with Supervisor and Commissioner Lavanino. I would note that in my opinion, it goes back quite a ways. He is possibly the funniest county supervisor in recent, at least since Bill Wallace, and possibly a worthy competitor in that regard. He's technically a professional, so I leave that to draw your own conclusions. In any event, we certainly welcome to show up anytime. We can throw an item on the agenda real fast and honor him. Do we need a motion on this? I would entertain a motion to express our appreciation to Commissioner Steve Lavanino for his stalwart services on the Santa Barbara LAFCO.
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? Any public comment?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak.
So the hordes of his Twitter followers didn't show up for the, in any event, hearing no public comment, Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Seves?
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman?
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer? Commissioner Hartman?
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield?
Aye.
Commissioner Williams?
Aye.
Chair Stark?
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
See, the next item is business item number 2. Madam Clerk, would you please read that item into the record?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, business item number 2 is continued from April 7th, 2022. It is to consider recommendations regarding the proposed budget for fiscal year 2022-2023.
Thank you. I'd ask our executive officer to report.
Thank you, Chair. So this was, the preliminary proposed budget was presented in April. The commission approved that and authorized us to transmit that to the member agencies, the cities, the special district, and the county, and we did that. We have not received any comment or feedback regarding that from any of the member agencies. But that was presented. In addition, the commission had requested that staff bring back a request to explain, if at best we could, the proportional breakdown and how that process works in determining each one of the agency's fees and cost for that, and how that formula and calculation worked. And so what I attempted to do here was present a couple of attachments in the report, 2 of them for prior year distributions from the county auditor's office on those formulas and the breakdown of how that's derived, essentially taking this revenue streams from the state controller's office that are reported there, putting them in a spreadsheet and showing what the percentages are. And using that same formula, I went onto the state controller's website, downloaded the 2020 revenues, and prepared a kind of a mock draft based on the budget that was presented in April, that overall budget number to be distributed amongst the agencies, and presented that in attachment C, so that you can see the fluctuation or the change that would occur within each agency. And the process in itself is rather nuanced in that it really depends on what the agency's revenues reporting are for that prior year. Some agencies you can see have gone up, some have gone down. I can tell you in overall, adding them all up, all of the agency's revenues have increased from year to year. But within that, some agencies are less than they were last year, some are more. And that's how they derive their percentage of the allocation. Following that, that April meeting, staff had still an outstanding recruitment position to be filled. We've had an interview panel do a first interview. We've held a second interview in the interim weeks to that, and we are getting close to fulfilling that recruitment position. And so with that, we're likely going to look at our budget line items and make some changes within those line items, but still maintaining our overall budget number that was presented in April. So there shouldn't be significant change to any of the estimate sample billing cost that's presented in attachment C. We are continuing our efforts and discussions with the clerk of the board's office and the concerns with their staffing issues and fulfilling the roles and duties in that area. And that conversation is still ongoing. And so we're looking to try to pick up as many services within the LAFCO employee roles as we can moving forward. And so in doing that, that's what's going to cause some of these line items to kind of bounce around a little bit. But we're still going to keep within that overall. This budget, as I've indicated in the plan, is really the financial plan to help achieve the work that's been adopted within the work plan that the commission adopted in January. It also helps us implement our role in the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act and our mission to accomplish all of that with all of the applications that come forward, to do the MSR work. And so that's what this overall budget is set out to do. So with that, I think I'll conclude that with my assessments. Oh, I did include some comparisons of neighboring LAFCOs and what their budgets are. They're in the table. And as you can see, we are really one of the more affordable, cost-effective for what we achieve as far as productivity and overall budgeting. We are in line as being one of the most conservative in that area for budget line items. And so you can look at that comparison. Those are recent numbers based off what those LAFCOs were proposing as they were going through this process. So if there are any other questions, either about the distribution formula, the work plan, or even the overall budget, I'm happy to answer any. Ultimately, we are asking that the commission continue this hearing as presented in the April proposed budget, and now reschedule a final budget for June 2nd.
Thank you. That's the action you wish today. Okay. Are there questions from board members or commission members? I don't hear any. Are there any requests to speak from the public?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. This item is back to the board for discussion. And just so I clarify, my understanding is what you want is to forward this document as presented to our next hearing for final approval of the budget. Is that correct? I have two requests from commissioners for comment.
Yeah, the staff report outlines the recommendation is to continue to accept the proposed budget and accept all public testimony about that budget. Again, you've already directed us and we've completed the distribution of that proposed budget to the member agencies. And so now it's to continue, schedule a public hearing for June 2nd to consider a final budget.
Thank you. I have questions from Commissioner Sierra and from Commissioner Geyer. Commissioner Sierra.
Thank you very much. Mine's just a comment. I think it's the same comment I had the last time. I realized that some of these raises and costs come from what the county expects back from LAFCO. But in 3 years, most of our cities are now going to be paying almost double what we did 3 years ago. That's just a comment. I hope it's not a continuing trend that every 3 years that our costs double. But LAFCO does good work, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Geyer.
I had no further comments, so I was going to make a motion.
If we have no further comments, no comments from the public, I will pause. I would entertain a motion. Commissioner Geyer, you wish to make a motion?
I do, to approve staff recommendation A, B, and C.
Thank you. We have a motion to approve the staff recommendations. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Sevis. Any further discussion?
I think I registered last time some of the heartburn that I think Director Sierra articulates as well. Just hope that that things are incremental from henceforth. It's and perhaps things will improve at the county, that it won't be as difficult of a thing in the future as it is this year. But I think I registered my heartburn last time, and I don't need to do it again.
Thank you. Without offering any tums or anything of that nature, I would ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Commissioner Seves,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield,
Aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stark.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. So we'll see the final budget in June. Next item is business item number 3. Will the clerk read that item into the record, please?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, business item number 3 is to consider recommendations regarding payroll service options and to direct staff accordingly, or to delegate authority to executive officer to sign professional service agreement with Payroll Vault to provide payroll services consistent to the terms set forth in the Payroll Vault proposal dated April 20th, 2022, for a cost of $186 per pay period, labor law poster package for $88 per year, and setup fee of $99, and other miscellaneous fees for issuing W-2s.
Thank you. Mr. Prater.
Thank you. All right, Commission. Back in February of this year, staff had requested that the Commission give authorization to evaluate the better payroll service provider, as we were having issues with our current payroll provider of ADP in filing our local taxes under 2 California ID numbers. The Commission did grant me the ability to go out and seek what's out there that could fulfill our needs. I provided some of those options within the staff report. Ultimately, the recommendation is to transition to Payroll Vault as the provider, who I believe is the best position to meet our needs, and that the Commission authorize the executive officer to execute that agreement consistent with the costs associated in that item. So if there are any questions about that, I'm happy to answer any.
Thank you. Or that concludes your report? Are there questions from the commission? Hearing none, Madam Clerk, are there any requests to speak from the public?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. This item is back to the board for discussion. I would now entertain a motion to approve. And the council, do you have a comment?
Well, I think on the recommendation, you have an option in the recommendation, but I think Mr. Prater's preference is to delegate authority to him to sign the final contract after review by council.
And that is a contract with a particular contractor, is it not?
Yes, with payroll services. And according to the terms outlined in the attachments. So as long as the essential terms stay the same, and there's no other provision that we think needs commission approval, he would sign the contract.
So the motion is to delegate the authority to execute the contract as presented to our executive officer. Commissioner Hartman?
I would make that motion.
Thank you. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Seves. Any further discussion? Thank you. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Seves,
Aye.
Commissioner Freeman,
Aye.
Commissioner Guyer,
Aye.
Commissioner Hartman,
Aye.
Commissioner Waterfield, Commissioner Waterfield. I believe we did hear her. She's just very faint.
That was a soft aye.
Commissioner Williams,
Aye.
Chair Stark.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. The next item is information item number 1. Would the clerk read that item into the record? In my understanding, this is an executive order officer report.
Chair Stark and members of the commission, information item number 1 is to receive and file a report on independent special district commissioner election results.
Great. Thank you, Chair and Commission. Yeah, after the mailed ballot success on time, we had closed the ballots on April 11th as the deadline. There was a notation correction. We actually had 21 eligible votes that did come in. There was one on the 11th, right before the deadline. that you'll see in the packet. And with that, there was a successful winner in that ballot, and that is our sitting commissioner, Mr. Jay Freeman. So he's been reappointed to a 4-year term that will now expire on March 1st, 2026. The ballot also had a second ballot option on whether to proceed with alternate proceedings moving forward for the next special district election process. And that would allow us to immediately move right into a mailed ballot process. That ballot was successful as well with the most yes votes. And so that will be the new procedure moving forward. So that concludes our election results for our special district election.
Thank you. Are there any requests to speak from the public on this?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Should have asked, are there any board questions? Supervisor Williams? or
Well, I was just
Commissioner
going to give him my congratulations. I think Mr. Freeman has probably transformed LAFCO elections because I have never seen such a diligence in touching bases with each special district, and really like a grassroots approach to this. And it's really, speaks to the way democracy should work, and it seems like they must be satisfied with the results. So,
Thank you. Any further comments? There's no motion necessary. Congratulations, Commissioner Freeman. And that next item is information item number 2. Would you read that item into the record?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, information item number 2 is to receive and file a status report on the Municipal Service Review Program.
Thank you. Mr. Prater.
Great. A little brief PowerPoint here. We are continuing to work on our Municipal Service Review Program, which includes the water, wastewater, recycled water, and stormwater services countywide. We have held a number of meetings with agency staff, with board members themselves, and so we're getting a bit of the word out there that we're working very hard on this effort. Some of the work level is a surprise to many of the agencies. They haven't seen so much involvement from LAFCO itself. Many questions are coming out about who is LAFCO and what do we do and why are we doing this? And so that prompted a little bit of kind of one of our later items, which is the orientation of LAFCO. I felt I've spoken about it many times in many of the components, and so that'll be part of this. But so far we have received one additional one. It says 15 there, but now we've had 16 responses that were received so far out of the 33 agencies for that deadline. I have extended that deadline till May 13th in hopes that we can get the remaining responses from those agencies. But essentially we are, still feel like we're still on track with the dates that were tentatively outlined in meeting our goals with that. And it's always an opportunity to talk about our short community survey that's on our website. So whenever the public watches any of these meetings or replays them, I always encourage them, there is that survey that we're asking for, their community input as to the services and the adequacy of services based on their opinion. So that concludes my report on the status of our MSR program.
Thank you. Any commissioners have any questions about this?
We have no request to speak on this item.
Are there any requests to speak from the public?
My apologies. No, there are no requests to speak.
No apologies necessary. No questions, no requests to speak. Am I correct that this does not require a motion on behalf of the commission? Is that correct?
Okay, information only.
Thank you. The next item would be public information item number 3. Madam Clerk, would you please read that into the record?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, information item number 3 is to receive and file a report on the status of the 2021-2022 audit of financial statements by Bartlett, Pringle, and Wolf, LLP for Santa Barbara LAFCO.
Thank you. Mr. Prater.
Great. Just to inform the commission again, just a brief announcement that our independent auditor is nearing their completion of this audit. I will note, I did note the 21-22, they're working on that one as well, but they're about to complete the 2021 audit. So my mistake on that. I think we're going to receive that independently. I initially thought they were going to come together as 2-year audit review, but I think they're coming in singly, one at a time. But they are working on that 2021 audit and that statement, and when that is ready, we'll bring that forth to the commission to review that. It's likely going to be in August, I would.
So there's nothing for us actually to receive and file
Nothing to
at
receive,
this
just to
time?
announce that they're working on it. We've given them all their documents. They're about to close up their audit, and we'll present that audit in the future.
Have you been advised as to whether there's going to be any audit exceptions to our report?
I have not been advised, other than they indicated it looked pretty good. So I think it's going to be a status quo of our traditional audits.
Thank you. Are there any questions or requests to speak?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. The next item is information item number 4. I would ask the clerk to please read that item into the record.
Chair Stark and members of the commission, information item number 4 is to receive and file a report on a LAFCO 101 orientation session.
Okay, Chair. You ready?
Go ahead. Yeah.
I don't know if I am. Buckle in. This is a presentation. As I indicated, many of the agencies and their directors have asked about LAFCO and kind of who we are and what we do, and the various staffs that I've been meeting with through our MSR work. We do have some new commissioners on our LAFCO, and it's always good to have a kind of a refresher of what it is that we do and what's our mission here. And so I was able to work with Cal LAFCO and pull off their classic Understanding Applying the Basics 101 session. Keep in mind, this is generally a 90-minute session. I'm going to try and blitz through this in about 20, 25 minutes. But I wanted to include all of the slides in its totality, so when it got printed, anybody from the public can pick it up and kind of go through. And if there are any questions, certainly reach out to us at our office.
Am I correct that the full PowerPoint and all its glory is on the
full
Cal
PowerPoint.
LAFCO website?
It is on the LAFCO website. It's on Cal LAFCO, minus my little addition of the introduction of Santa Barbara orientation for this date. So with that, I'll kind of go through it as quickly as I can and hit the highlights. So why, typically what we're going to cover, why is LAFCO, why was it created? What's the legislative mission, scope, and composition, the planning and regulatory functions that LAFCO typically does, and some legal ease stuff about that. And then we can go through any questions and answers if the commission has any. But traditionally, you've probably all heard this story about the population boom in California, right? So there was all these sort of annexation wars in the early years, in the 30s and 40s. Ultimately, the governor at the time wanted to focus on these urban problems and commissioned a report. Here's some slides of that population and its growth and some of what they call the nightmare numbers. You can see some explosion happening in and around this era in California. And so, along with that, was this need for water and taking water from different parts of the state and moving it around. And in the early years, we kind of thought water was plentiful. It's going to stick around here for us. As we all found out, and we're all living in that drought season now, there is not that kind of water to sustain all of this population and to just move it wherever we want to as we need. So the commission study was called Metropolitan Problems, Meeting the Metropolitan Problems, and out of that came this notion of forming LAFCO, right? So in the early 60s, LAFCO was established through legislation. And the main purpose here was to encourage orderly boundaries, discourage urban sprawl, preserve ag and open space, encourage the efficient public services, and then consider any regional sort of needs in housing, water, other key issues. And these are the same main principles and purposes that we hold today and adhere to throughout the Cortese-Hertzberg Act. What didn't come out of this study was that there was no statewide commission or agency. So they recognized that they wanted more local control and have a LAFCO within each county and not have a state commission that ran LAFCO. And so each county came up with its own independence as a LAFCO to administer the rules that were in play at the time. And the legislation was not small. There was a number of different legislations that were enacted throughout those years. And they were all these different pieces of documents that guided the process. And so that was the early years. All the way up until about 2000. 2000 is what we now believe is sort of the modern Cortese-Hertzberg Act. So it was a consolidation of all these prior legislative pieces that guided the process and how to deal with boundary changes and annexations. And in 2000, they also sort of broadened some of the components for LAFCO. Certainly, that's the modern era of the funding formula of the 1/3 distributed amongst the agencies. They also now made LAFCO the conducting authority, procedures through that. Before that, it was the Board of Supervisors or the city councils if the annexation was into the city. So they consolidated all that under the roof of a LAFCO to now do. They also added this component of municipal service reviews, and to do that every 5 years as a periodic review while we update spheres of influence. And they added a number of other factors for us to look at through water supply and most recently disadvantaged unincorporated communities. And the result of this outcome was through another study called Growth Within Bounds to look at the 21st century, how were LAFCOs doing now that they've been in effect since the early 60s, and whether or not LAFCOs still needed to exist, or did we do our job and can they move on and do something else? Well, Growth Within Bounds essentially said LAFCOs need to stay. They were the neutral, independent party in evaluating annexations and boundary changes and services, and that they liked the well-balanced mixed-up of the commission itself, that it provided the public good distribution of representation. And as we indicated, many of the powers within LAFCO were strengthened as a result of this Growth Within Bounds study. It talked about orderly development, extensions of governmental services that were still happening that needed to be tackled. And so you were starting to see out-of-agency service agreements come into play and how to deal with those. And we always kept the main functions of orderly growth, protecting ag, and open space. Those are the main tenets. So the LAFCO commissioner's role in itself, why LAFCOs matter, and what decisions you'll make, and what are your responsibilities, and what decisions support by the statutes or local policies we'll kind of go over. So as I indicated, LAFCO as a body is an independent body, right? So you exercise your independent judgment on behalf of the public, not necessarily by the agency that appointed you or that you represent, although that is part of your makeup and perspective of what you bring to LAFCO. But you're also bringing in this broader sense. And really, you're basing many of your decisions on the Cortese-Hertzberg Act itself and the fundamental elements within that legislative piece of legislation. and any of the local policies that we adopt. And Santa Barbara LAFCO has adopted many local policies as well. And so we're using all of this information to help guide the decisions that we make. And ultimately, what we like to term is this LAFCO hat. You wear your LAFCO hat when you come to LAFCO, and you make those broader perspective decisions on the public as a whole. Ultimately, the commission's decision is the final decision, so there is no appealable body or administrative body to take up with if anybody's dissatisfied with the outcome of the decision that you have made. The staff is accountable to the commission and the statute both. And so if the statute guides us to do a certain thing, we adhere to that and try to deal with any, minimize any conflicts that might arise about any direction that was given. And we are also, as we said, adopt local policies and procedures, which we have done. In the end, what CKH is asking of you as a commission is to make a decision within this balancing act. And so here we have the scales. Many of the legislative pieces, CEQA, the Revenue Taxation Code, the principal acts that govern districts are one piece of the component, and it guides you in your decision. And then you have all these local conditions, these local policies. You have the general plans of both cities and counties, and the service capabilities that we evaluate under municipal service reviews, that we ask for and plan for services. And then you have the public as their comment and their opinion as a whole. And then you have your other fellow commissioners that you weigh in. So you balance all these decisions and come to what makes sense to you in your final recommendation out of whether to approve an annexation, a boundary change, or whatnot. Okay, so as you're likely aware, we're all sitting here today. We have all 11 members, so that's great. It's a diverse group. We have 2 county supervisors that sit on LAFCO, 2 city council members that sit on LAFCO, and a public member that sit on LAFCO. And then each one of those categories has an alternate that can sit in the absence of one of those members, or if there's a conflict of interest and one needs to step down. In addition to that, 30 different LAFCOs throughout the state also have special district members that represent them. And we are one of those counties that have special district member representation. There are some LAFCOs that have special seats where a particular city always represents themselves on a LAFCO, or there are some counties that have no cities at all in their county, and so they don't have a city member because they don't have a city in there. Here's a depiction of the state of California with the representation of those 30 LAFCOs that have special district members. And you see we're in the southern end, and most of the southern has special district representation. And it's kind of scattered throughout the northern area with most of the coast, including special districts. So what kind of decisions do you typically make? We're all accustomed to the traditional annexation application that comes through. Maybe there's a detachment that goes along with that. We've heard some notions about consolidations and what does that mean. That's really the combining of 2 cities or 2 districts and creating a new entity as an outcome of that. But there's a number of other things that your commission is obligated to make decisions on. You obviously can form cities, form districts. You formed several districts here in the recent past. You study spheres of influence in municipal service reviews. You also look at activation of latent powers, and that's a power that isn't acted on by a particular special district, but they may want to activate that power and start to provide that type of service. And the most recent addition is the commission now has to review any fire contracts that come about. Okay, so we're all pretty familiar with probably the agencies that LAFCO does regulate. It's the cities, the county, the special districts that come in that. And when you think of county, it's traditionally in the form of a county service area that's done. But what we've listed here are the agencies that typically do not fall under LAFCO's review. And those are typically JPAs or facility districts. zones of benefits, obviously the Air Pollution Control District or the Council of Governments, those, and school district boundaries, those are not under the LAFCO purview. So any boundary changes that deal with that, or even the county overall whole as a whole boundary, the commission does not take up those actions. We stick to the other agencies. A quick tutorial of the LAFCO process. It's pretty linear in its effect. An application comes in, it moves through the process, there's a property tax exchange, staff does some analysis, there's a LAFCO hearing, it either gets approved or denied, and then there's these protest proceedings that are applicable if not exempted or waived in some fashion. And then ultimately, the annexation is completed through that process. And any portion along the way, that application could be terminated by some means or mechanism. This is a slide on the protest provisions of what that process is. Most people are kind of eyes glazed over when you start to talk about this process. What I will note is staff has made aware of Senate Bill 938, which is an attempt to consolidate these protest provisions and have them all fit within the CKH Act and adhere to the same percentage rules universally throughout all the processes. And so we're hopeful that that legislation can move forward in this coming year. And that's been worked on by Cal LAFCO over the past 3 years to try to get this initiative moving on that. In addition, you have some planning functions. So obviously we do spheres of influence, those boundary changes for cities and districts, and we prepare municipal service reviews. And as we've explained, we're in the midst of one now. We work cooperatively on growth, preservation, and service delivery issues. And so any of those issues are kind of planning and function issues that LAFCO gets involved in and takes a note of. Some of the regulatory functions, these modifications of these existing agencies and creations of new ones, those are basically just when areas are annexed or detached. So you're modifying the boundary in some way, right? Or we create a new one, we form a new district. We always, we're considering these boundary changes. And so those are the regulatory functions that you typically have. And they follow a pretty strategic or straightforward linear process that's outlined in the Act. The one thing that your commission is prohibited from doing is directly regulating land use. And so often you'll see a proposal that may come before you that has to deal with land use. In this case, we saw today 27 apartment units that came forward that went through a general plan amendment change and a rezone that the county regulates. So they'd made that decision. The commission, in your wisdom and in your balancing act of those decisions, can decide, is that an appropriate project and does it need services? And you could give an up or down. In this case, you felt it was appropriate and you approved that annexation. But if you felt it wasn't appropriate for some reason and you took the direction of denying that application to move forward, what you could not essentially do is regulate the land use itself. And so if you didn't feel 27 units was enough, it wasn't dense enough, our direction would just to be to deny it based on not meeting the criteria and the local policies. But we would not direct the agency to make it 30 units or 35 units. Now we're getting into land use decisions, and that's the area we need to stay away from. So environmental review, many of the projects do fall under CEQA. Typically the pre-zoning by cities make them the lead agency, or often there's a land use entitlement that the county might approve if it's in the unincorporated area, makes them the lead agency, and we are often the responsible agency as we were today. There are some specific tailored exemptions for LAFCO. They're class 19 and 20. All right, the legal role. I'll try to move quickly through this. Although the commission does have very broad powers that are outlined in the Act, as long as you sort of limit those to certain actions, that are granted to you by the statute. You stay in your lane, you're usually pretty good. Although you must consider these land use issues, right, we talked about, but you can't regulate them directly. So that's the one area we stay away from in that. Often LAFCO is considered sort of as this watchdog agency overlooking these agencies. That is sort of one of our jobs, but that's not the main or sole job in that. But we do use that and often exercise that watchdog process through our municipal service review process. So we are also subject to a number of other state laws. Obviously, the Cortese-Hertzberg Act is the legislation that enacted us and guides us through much of the process. But we are subject to the Brown Act, Public Records Act, CEQA, Revenue Taxation Code, Conflict of Interest laws, Levine Act, and other principal acts that govern special districts. So the key legal concern that typically comes up is that you must act in accordance with the state law and any locally adopted policies when you're making your decisions. We must comply with CEQA, and we must adopt determinations that support the decision that you make. And you do have the ability to add terms and conditions as part of your approval process. The types of decisions that you make are typically quasi-legislative in that realm. Typically, you'll see counties and cities that have planning authority. Those are, different types of legislative actions that they take. You're more in that role of you're making the decision that the legislator would have made if this was a state legislative body that's following the state legislative of the Cortese-Hertzberg Act. And that's why the decisions that you make are not applicable. Except for if somebody disagrees with you, they can always take us to a court. Although there is a short period in which to file those suits, and so you have to know that process. All right. Any decisions can be litigated that you do make, though. So it's always a good idea to go through all the reports and make all the findings that are necessary that support that record and that evidence, which is often why you see many of our packets pretty thick in volume, right? Even a simple annexation that you saw today, a pretty hefty volume. It's a pretty good record that we put together to make that decision. There's still typically the riskier projects that come in, they tend to identify themselves. And certainly we work with our legal counsel early on and often to help identify those and navigate around those so that by the time they come to the commission, hopefully all of those have been ironed out and we can present a good, solid project with good evidence. At the end of the day, it's always about making a good record that supports your decision. Typical claims that come in are listed here. Often CEQA is the number one thing that you'll see if you want to be litigated against. If we made some sort of procedural mistake, a misstep within the Cortese-Hertzberg Act, are the ones that are most prevalent. So as being independent, LAFCO provides its own office and its own equipment and its own personnel. So the commission appoints an executive officer to manage the LAFCO office. You also appoint your legal counsel, but we can contract for staffing services beyond that. And then you have all the administrative authorities as an independent public agency that does. We talked about funding briefly in the budget proposal. The budget typically has to be finally adopted by June 15th. We're on pace to bring this back on June 2nd to adopt our final budget. Many of us LAFCOs adopt the work plan as what was presented in today's budget packet. That budget process is all outlined in the Cortese-Hertzberg Act that we must follow. There is a component of this minimal funding level. It's denied, so typically you have to make findings if the funding year to year drops below what was anticipated from the prior year, you have to explain that you can still achieve the work that's set out for you to achieve if your funding is going to be less. Generally, that net cost is after we've anticipated the cost of application fees for the given year is the net cost. That cost is then funded in equal thirds between the county, cities, and special districts, as we talked about. And then that budget of the net cost is sent to the county auditor's office, who then calculates all of those charges, and then they process the invoice on our behalf. So the staff serves the public and the commission, and the way we do that is we provide accurate and comprehensive information for you to make decisions on. We analyze and we interpret the act itself and all the other laws and look at all of the components of CEQA and general plans and all of those state laws that were identified in the prior slide. Ultimately, staff makes that staff report. We study all that and we make a recommendation for your commission to do. Once your commission has made that decision, then your staff implements that through the rest of the process. The current challenges that many LAFCOs are facing are updating the spheres of influence within the every 5-year time frame within that statute. We're often seeing these extensions of services by agencies not knowing that they're applicable under the code 56133. And so they may go ahead and extend service outside of their district boundary, not knowing that they need the LAFCO's authorization to do so. And then we'll see that you have the ability to impose conditions, and what those conditions are and the limit to those conditions are always seem to be tested throughout many of the LAFCOs in the state. There are special requirements for ag land conversions, particularly if they're Williamson Act properties, and those are all outlined in the Cortesian-Ots-Hertzberg Act on how to deal with those. And as we've seen, disadvantaged unincorporated communities is a key component that's been added to LAFCO's role and responsibility in making sure that these communities are not left out in vital services such as water, sewer, and fire. Here's a list of other additional resources that you can go to. It's included, and that concludes our presentation. Welcome to LAFCO 101.
Thank you. I'm assuming that the quiz for LAFCO 101 will be waived. Would seem appropriate. Thank you. Can I have one simple question? Do you know if there are any designated ducks in Santa or I'm pronouncing it ducks. I guess you could just do it dukes just as easily in Santa Barbara County?
Yes, there are.
Could you name them?
Yes. For sure, there are disadvantaged communities in Lompoc, City of Santa Maria, Gary, there's Guadalupe, there's a handful of them. They're all identified in our previous MSR that we did for the fire fire and police services.
So a disadvantage, or it doesn't have to be unincorporated. There could be a neighborhood or a sub-community within an incorporated city that qualifies as a duck for our purposes.
It can, and there are statutes for cities and counties to evaluate and look at those. And when they're doing their general plan amendments to make sure that they get services equal just to any other citizen within their city. For LAFCO, it's specific to the unincorporated area. So we may identify that there's a disadvantaged community within the city of Guadalupe, say, but it's within a city and it's not unincorporated. And so therefore, there isn't any extra boundary change that we need to do to get those individuals additional services.
We
identify them.
We only come into play when there's a change of organization.
When there's a change of organization and they're unincorporated.
Thank you. Or if there are any, Commissioner Freeman.
So there's one thing you said which raised two related questions in my mind, and I think I'm going to ask the easier one first, and you might end up guessing the second harder version of it. But so you said that local agencies regulated by LAFCO includes counties, cities, most special districts, and does not include improvement districts. So the Embarcadero Municipal Improvement District, a municipal improvement district is not an improvement district. Is that right?
That is a special district that was authorized by legislation that does fall under LAFCO. That's an exception under the generic term.
The hard one, which I mean, because I remember there actually was arguments about this, that I'm not certain what the status of it is the San Ynez River Water Conservation District, in Improvement District Number 1, which I remember their lawyer insisted we did not regulate, and I don't remember what the status of it is, and I'm curious,
That's a good question. I wondered that same question too when I first got here. And what I have unearthed in my research was that they are subject, and they have dutifully responded to our surveys in the MSR. So I take it that they themselves now feel that they are regulated under LAFCO, and I think in the past LAFCO has treated them as an agency underneath their authority.
I would just add, Commissioner Freeman, that there was quite a bit of contention over that. We finally settled the matter, but our main concern was not that they were an improvement district. They were an improvement district that was a water purveyor to over 7,000 people. And we said, if you only function as an improvement district, you have a legitimate argument. But when you turn around and start providing water like at other water supply agencies, you're subject to LAFCO.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from commission members? Are there any questions from the public?
Chair Stark and members of the commission, we have no request to speak on this item.
Thank you. Is this this is an information item? We don't need to do anything other than thank Mr. Prater for this report. Is that correct? Madam Clerk, we will now go to commissioner announcements. Are there any commissioners that have any announcements? I'm hearing none. I would say we will now go to executive officer comments. Mr. Prater.
I have a couple of comments. Most notably, we are still holding our June 2nd meeting, but for those commissioners that might be thinking about July, we are anticipating canceling the July meeting. And so I don't think we have any pressing issues that need to come before the commission for July. So if you're wanting to plan any summer vacation time, you can start to plan those. I'm pretty confident in that. Other than that, it's the Lompoc Flower Festival, Cinco de Mayo Day, and don't forget about your mothers this weekend. Thanks for having the meeting.
May I ask you a question? I have a question. Do you happen to, would you be so kind as to remind the commission of the date for the annual Cal LAFCO meeting and indicate? My understanding is they're supposed to try to have a live.
They're still anticipating, there's a planning committee still, it's in Newport Beach in October. I can't quite recall the date. I want to say the 21st of some time. Maybe I can get some help, and I'll clarify that and maybe send that out to the commission on what those dates are in anticipation of that. But it will be in Newport Beach, likely, if they can hold it in late October.
Thank you. Do you have any further comments? We're done. Well, in that case, I will declare LAFCO adjourned until Thursday, June 2nd at 1:00 p.m. Thank you very much.